Hello, everyone. I'm Kamraun.
And I'm Billy. Welcome to the Horse Frog Podcast, home of your two favorite professional digressors.
Today, we will be discussing Book 5, Chapter 16 of Gardens of the Moon, a novel in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This episode covers the second half of the chapter.
Now, this podcast series is intended to be a companion to reading or listening to the books set in the Malazan universe. It's not a book review, and it is most definitely not intended to be a replacement to reading these amazing books. Know that Kamraun and I know this series is the best fantasy story ever written, and we are approaching this from a purely fanboy point of view, and there will be no critique. Just love, baby.
We will be covering the events of the books in a linear fashion. There will be spoilers for those that have not read the books. We will try not to spoil anything prior to us covering that portion of the respective book.
Now, quick warning, today's episode may contain zero violence or it may contain copious amounts of life-altering carnage, so take your chances. Show not intended for minor audiences, though.
Our show is listener-supported. If you would like to support us, please check out our Patreon link on our website at horsefrogproductions.com.
Also, we'd really like to hear from you, so send any feedback or comments to contact@horsefrogproductions.com.
All right, Chapter 16 continued. We are taken to Captain Perrin several days after his encounter with the hounds, Animander Rake, and his entry into Dragnapur. He came to the realization that had Rake known he was a Malazan soldier, he'd now be dead. Perrin was ruminating on his string of luck, the fact that Sari hadn't checked twice to confirm his death, and now Rake had saved him from the Hounds of Shadow. He recognized Opan's flavor in his luck and didn't have cause to doubt Rake's assertion that this was the case. Just as a quick reminder, Rake told him to keep the sword as long as he has good luck, and then to either give it to his worst enemy or to break it upon the turn.
I don't want to find out when the luck turns, though. It's like, how do you
that's
find out? You know, it's like,
yeah.
is it like, does it wear off? Or is it just all of a sudden it's lucky, then it ain't? It's
What level does it have to be? So say, for example, you're walking through the market and you step in the leavings of somebody's horse.
Right.
Does that count as bad luck? Or somebody dumping their slop bucket on your head as you're walking through the town? Does that count as bad luck? Or,
Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to ruminate on something. We watched this television series, Nosferatu. Mm-hmm. It's Joe Hill, which is Stephen King's son. It's a really good take on the Nosferatu. It's a vampire, but it's like psychic vampire meets other crazy. It's a bunch of other crazy. It's Stephen King's son, dude. It's a great mix-up of stuff. But there's a guy praying for a sign, and he's the bad guy, mind you, or he works for the bad guy. He's at this cemetery, and there's a bunch of pigeons around on this statue, and he's praying for a sign, and as he's got his mouth open, a bird craps in his mouth. It's like just like and he thinks it's the sign. It's just it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So is it that level?
Yeah. Or do we need to go up a level?
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Perrin wondered whether the luck came from the sword, and he hoped not. He decided that the road the Empire set before him was no longer worth traveling, having walked that path of blood and treachery for too long. Perrin vowed he'd never walk it again. What now lay before him was the singular effort to save the lives of Whiskey Jack and his squad. If he managed that task, he would not take issue with his own death. I love it. He's found his purpose and one worthy of achieving at that.
Agreed. I think this is awesome. Makes me just really love this old boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he got some good growth through this section here. Mm-hmm. Now, I had this quote highlighted from a prior read-through, and it still moves me as much as the first time I read it. Quote, "Some things went beyond a single man's life, and maybe justice existed outside the minds of humanity, beyond even the hungry eyes of gods and goddesses, a thing shining and pure and final," end quote. What are your thoughts on that?
I do agree that I believe that there is a justice that exists outside of us, because but I'm a Christian, so I believe in a God, so I believe in this, that this God is absolute just, so I have to believe in that there is this, so it actually fits into that niche. Except that I do believe that there are other gods, but I believe that they are created by our Creator. Mm. They're part of His counsel, but that's weird stuff. That's part of the fall. My believings of the fall. So I believe in justice existing outside of mankind for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I have a little bit of a different take on it because I am agnostic, right? So, I have a pretty strong sense of morality. I don't know that I got that through a religion. So.
Sure.
That's kind
Well,
of my point on it. Yeah.
if you got it from America, you did from the fact that the Ten Commandments has been part of the civil law since the creation of the Ten Commandments. You know,
I don't think I got it from America though. You know, like my dad's wasn't. He's not from America.
Sure, but the thou shalt not kill and all that stuff. You know, that's actually because you have to understand that is the funny part of Christianity that a lot of folks overlook is it's an Eastern religion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not a Western religion. It's not a white religion. It's an Eastern religion. It comes from the Middle East.
Yeah.
So it's closer to Oriental than than Western, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
geographically speaking.
Yeah.
Geographically speaking.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, sorry. Will I get bleeped for that?
For what?
The O word?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Yeah. Oh. Nowadays, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I asked that legitimately. I was like, is that offensive?
Yeah.
Am I being offensive with that statement?
Maybe a generational thing. Yeah.
Okay, because there's no offense meant. I mean, I just meant in a geographically, in an orientation, in an oriental orientation. Yes.
Oh.
Orientationally speaking. Okay, I'll stop. I'll shut up. I'm sorry.
Insert foot in mouth. Perrin's thoughts went to the teachings of philosopher tutors during his schooling in Unta. They had claimed that morality was as an imperative of life, a natural law that was neither the brutal acts of beasts nor the lofty ambitions of humanity. It was unassailable. A quote from a conversation with Lorne came to mind. Just another hunt for certainty. Her tone had been brittle and cynical, and the statement had put an end to the conversation. He thought that for such words to have come from Lorne when she was only a little older than him was just a lazy mimicry of Lassine's viewpoint. Perrin recognized that Lassine had a right to that viewpoint, given she was the empress of the Malazan Empire. Lorne could not have had generated her views based on her own life experiences. This made him ruminate on how Lorne had truly made herself the empress's extension. She had only dropped the mask once. That had been when they walked through the dead bodies on the road in Itko Khan. Her mask had slipped to show a frightened girl. Now he couldn't remember what had caused her mask to return, but thought it may have been some statement he threw out in his own guise as a hardened soldier. It's interesting, isn't it, how humans try to fit in or impress people by making themselves out to be more than they are, covering up our insecurities with bravado, as in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. And playing into what you said about insecurities, I'm assuming that is fear, in and of itself, or a type of fear. So that we do this out of to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. In that case, Perrin didn't want to look weak as a soldier trying to impress her, and then. Yes. For it to go both ways, she was probably just as scared.
Well, she's a young kid too.
Yeah,
these kids are 20 and 21, something like that, and these are
at that time
kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're making big decisions, empire-altering decisions.
Yes, Perrin sighed and thought, too many regrets, lost chances, and with each one passing, the less human we all became, and the deeper into the nightmare of power we all sank. He wondered if his life was irretrievable and wished he had an answer to the question. The only way to find out is to live life on your terms in the best way you know how. Doing nothing to change the situation will almost certainly guarantee you continue down the same path.
Agreed. Absolutely.
I love to see the way his internal dialogue is processing the situation, though. Real growth here for him.
Oh, yeah. And like I said, I'll cover this a little bit later on, too, but just about Perrin in general, how much he is just such a great character that I feel like I've given him short shrift in my past read-throughs. Mm-hmm. I tend to think of him more brusquely.
Yes. Initially, I definitely grew to like him in later books more, but liking him this early in the story, this is the first time I'm experiencing that.
I think it's because we've taken the time and not speed reading through the stuff. So we're actually focusing on it's like, wow, this piece is pretty cool, dude.
Yeah. It's not working for Crocus, though. Sorry, buddy.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's still a little too in the emo phase.
We'll see how that progresses.
Yeah.
Perrin was distracted from his thoughts by some movement to the south. He became aware of a rumbling sound. He rose in his saddle to find a wall of dust over the ridge of land directly in front of him. He swung his mount westward and rode for some time. He reined in and found dust in that direction as well. He cursed and rode to a nearby rise and found dust in all directions. The thundering was too regular to be a storm. Perrin rode down to the plain below and reined in again, unsure of what to do. Dark shapes became visible in the dust, and he recognized them as Bedarin. Quick reminder, these are the buffalo-like creatures that live on the Revi Plain. Perrin had heard stories of the creatures moving across the plains in herds 500,000 strong. And that sounds like the Great Plains in the U.S. in the 1800s before the bison were annihilated, doesn't it?
Yeah. And that image is exactly what I have in mind right there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Of how I think they used to just cover the ground kind of almost like grass in some areas.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Perrin recognized there was nothing he could do given he was completely surrounded on all sides. Nowhere to lead his horse to safety. He leaned back in his saddle and waited. A flash of movement to his left caused him to turn. Something heavy hammered into him from his right and dragged him from the saddle. Again he cursed as he thumped heavily into the dust and grappled with wiry limbs. He drove his knee up into the attacker's stomach. The attacker rolled to one side, gasping. Perrin scrambled to his feet and found himself facing a boy wearing tanned hides. The boy sprang forward, and Perrin sidestepped and clouted him on the side of the head, knocking him unconscious.
Ouch.
Perrin heard piercing cries on all sides, and the Bedarin parted. Figures emerged, closing on him. He recognized them as Revi, who were sworn enemies of the Empire and allied with Caladan Brood and the Crimson Guard. 2 warriors came forward and dragged the unconscious boy away. The Bedarin herd stopped.
Real quick thing here. Did you know that there is a Canadian band called Caladan Brood?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is it Canadian?
I don't know where they're from, and I haven't heard them, but I did know that there is a band with that name. Yeah,
I love that. I think they use a bunch of these song titles or a bunch of his stuff. I'm curious if Erikson's in it.
Oh,
it'd be great if he plays like some death metal, and this is his death metal band.
That'd be funny. Yeah.
That would be hilarious, dude.
Mm-hmm. Do you think he'd play an instrument?
Yeah, absolutely.
What kind of instrument do you think he'd play?
Dude, I'm a bassist. I'm going to say he's a bass player because the bass players are cool. They're the quiet, cool ones. They're always told they're not because they have to stand at the back, but I don't stand at the back. You don't keep this guy in a corner.
Yeah. Nobody puts Billy's back.
That's right. That's right. Nobody puts Billy in a corner.
That's right. A Revi warrior boldly approached Perrin. His face was stitched with dyed threads, black and red, from high on the cheeks down to the jawline, then up and around the mouth. A Bedarin hide covered his shoulders. The warrior stopped less than an arm length from Perrin, and he reached out and closed a hand on Chance's grip. Perrin slapped the hand away. The warrior smiled and stepped back, then let loose a high-pitched, ululating cry. I hate that word. Revi rose on the backs of the Bedarins surrounding Perrin.
Not as much as core skating.
No, I actually like that. I'm good with that one.
Okay. Okay.
Revi rose on the backs of the Bedarins surrounding Perrin. They held lances balanced in one hand as they crouched on the backs of the beasts. The 2 warriors that had dragged the boy away returned, and the stitched-faced warrior said something to the warrior to his left. Before Perrin could react, the warrior moved forward and threw a leg behind Perrin's and drove a shoulder into his chest. The warrior fell on top of Perrin and slid a knife against Perrin's jawline. The knife edge sliced through his helmet strap. The warrior pulled Perrin's iron skull cap off and snagged a handful of hair. Perrin reached his limit. He stood up, dragging the warrior with him. He thought death was one thing, but death without dignity was another. The Revi twisted his hand, which pulled Perrin's head up. As the warrior did this, Perrin grabbed the man's jewels and yanked hard. The warrior shrieked, releasing Perrin's hair. A knife flashed at Perrin's face, and he ducked to one side and grabbed the wrist with his free hand and squeezed the jewels again. The warrior shrieked again, and Perrin let go, twisted around, and drove his armored elbow into the man's face. Blood spattered, and the man crumpled in the dust. Perrin is making a mockery of these dudes. Maybe they're letting the weaker ones go first.
Well, I'm guessing also Perrin must be a little bit bigger fellow too, because it's the idea of him getting up with this guy on top of him, just kind of getting up while he's on top of him, like, I've had enough, I'm getting up. You know, it's like, I'm not playing, and just like gets up and just knocks the stuff out of him. But do you think that maybe he has had extra training due to his affiliation with Lorne and the adjunct and the Empress possibly, or is this just average Malazan soldier, better equipped, better trained, or maybe a little of both?
I think it's both. I think
Both?
he had training growing up.
Yes.
He had training, special training that's alluded to later when he's sitting with Call talking about his claw training. But I'm assuming there was also, I mean, he was in the military before as a Marine too. So we know a little bit about the Marines boot camp.
Yeah.
And it's no joke. And then I'm assuming he also got additional training under Lorne's retinue.
That's kind of what I was thinking too. So I think he's just a bad dude, and it's kind of finally
and
starting
also
to
bigger.
surface. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm assuming these people are a little bit smaller. I mean, that's a racial characteristic of these folks.
Right. I think that they have been referred to as small brown-skinned people that heard the veteran before, right?
Yes.
Perrin was hit by a glancing blow on his temple with a lance. He spun around with the impact. A second lance hit him in the hip and numbed his leg. He felt something else pin his foot to the ground. Perrin unsheathed Chance, and it was almost knocked from his hand. It let loose a ringing, pealing sound. He swung it upward, and it was struck again. Half blinded by the pain, sweat, and dust, Perrin stood upright and shifted his grip on Chance to a two-handed grip and drew the weapon into a center guard position. The blade was struck a third time, but he held his grip. There was silence around him. He looked around. Reeve stood on all sides, but none moved. Their eyes were wide. Perrin looked down at Chance, then back to the warriors, and finally back to Chance. He saw 3 iron lance heads sprouting from the blade, each point split and jammed in place. The hafts were gone. There was a jagged tear on Chance's leather scabbard. He looked down, and he saw a lance had struck his boot, and the flat of the blade was against the side of his foot. He looked at his hip and saw no wound. Splintered wood lay all around him. Talk about a surprise. I would like to have seen that from the Reeve perspective.
Absolutely. Did his sword jump in front of those lances?
It sounds like that a little bit, doesn't it?
It kind of does. He moved some of his positioning, but it doesn't sound like he knew what was happening almost.
No, he was blinded and stunned.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So the sword was just kind of just doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been trippy to see.
Yeah.
That would have been great.
The Reeve warrior with the smashed face lay a few feet from him. His mount and pack horses were untouched. That's Perrin's mount and pack horses.
Right.
The Reeve surrounding him had pulled back and now split to allow a young girl of around 5 years of age to approach. The warriors moved from her path and looked at her in awe, fear, or both. She wore antelope skins and had nothing on her feet. Perrin noted something familiar about her gait and her stance as she stopped before him. Her heavy-lidded gaze made him frown uneasily. She stopped to look at him and frowned as well. She raised one hand as if to reach for him, then dropped it. Perrin couldn't pull his eyes from her and thought, "Child, do I know you?" An old woman came up behind the girl and rested a hand on the girl's shoulder. She looked worn, almost exasperated, and stood as she studied Perrin. The girl said something to the old woman in Reeve, which prompted the old woman to cross her arms. The girl spoke again, more insistently. The old woman addressed Perrin in Daru. 5 lances claimed you as our enemy. 5 lances were wrong. Perrin quipped, "You've plenty more." This poor guy. He's done with this whole situation at this point, you know.
And I love it. And like I said, if I haven't said it enough, I've really enjoyed Perrin so much more on our read-throughs together. I feel like he is our entry into the series, meaning that I should have been more sympathetic to Perrin on my first 3 read-throughs. He's kind of like our viewpoint in a way. We're just thrown in like with this poor guy.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, what's going on here? I don't know. I'm just lucky. Right now, he's literally just lucky. And we know this because the luck gods are on his side.
Right.
Or God. Is it
It's
God
weird.
singular, but that's shared by not a trinity, but a godhood that's shared though.
Yeah, I've heard Opan as singular, but then they say the twins.
Yes. So I guess it's a shared divinity. So.
Yeah. The old woman said, "So we have, and the gods favoring your sword has no followers here." Perrin growled, "So finish it. I'm tired of the game." The girl spoke in a tone of command. The old woman turned to her in surprise. The girl continued in explanatory tones. The old woman listened, then looked back at Perrin. She said, "You are Malazan, and Malazans have chosen to be the enemies of the Revi. Is this choice yours as well? And know this, I will recognize a lie when I hear it." Perrin said, "I am Malazan by birth. I have no interest in calling the Revi my enemy. I would rather have no enemies at all." This statement by Perrin, I really like it. The fact that he would rather have no enemies at all.
Yeah, it's a fantastic way to be. It's a fantastic way to live. That's how we are called to live.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, so rather have no enemies at all.
The old woman blinked and said, "She offers you words to ease your grief, soldier." Perrin asked her meaning. She said, "You are to live." Perrin didn't believe her. He said, "What words has she for me? I've never seen her before." The old woman told him the child hadn't seen him either, yet they knew each other. Perrin again argued they didn't know each other. The old woman said, "Will you hear her words or not? She offers you a gift. Will you throw it back in her face?" Perrin was still uneasy, but said, "No, I suppose not." The old woman said, "The child says you need not grieve. The woman you know has not passed through the arching trees of death. Her journey was beyond the lands you can see, beyond those of the spirit that all mortals sense. And now she has returned. You must be patient, soldier. You will meet again, so this child promises." Perrin's heart was pounding. He said, "Which woman?" The old woman responded, "The one you thought dead." Perrin again looked at the girl. The familiarity hit him like a blow to his chest, so much so that he staggered back a step. He whispered, "Not possible." The girl withdrew into the crowd. Perrin called out, "Wait!" but she didn't return. There was another cry, and the herd began to move again, obscuring the Revi. Soon all Perrin could see was the backs of all the beasts. For a moment he thought to push among them, but realized it would likely bring his death. Again he yelled, "Wait!" but he was drowned out by the sound of thousands of hooves. He thought, Tattersail. I guess that's a pretty important revelation to Perrin at this point in his journey.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that
I
section?
don't. I agree with you. It's a very important part of his and the core story. It's a little too early to elaborate on that, though.
Billy and I had a little bit of a digression, but we can't include what spawned us on this, but we wanted to include a little discussion about our dislike of jungles in general, and then we derailed into invasive species and venomous creatures in Texas. So enjoy.
Yeah. Yes, please. Enjoy our cringing factor. We're just like, we're horrified.
I've never been a big fan of the jungle.
Dude, I have not either. And I have a hard time. I do have a hard time slogging through that stuff because it's like I just want it to be over. I want the jungle to be over.
Yeah.
I hate the desert, but I would rather be stuck in the desert. I don't know why. Where they burn up. I don't know why. It's like jungle horrifies me. It's too close. It's too claustrophobic.
Snakes. Animals that want to kill you.
Oh my.
Spiders. Ants.
There's a lot of
the worst of the worst.
Yes.
Falling on you from every direction.
Yes.
Mosquitoes.
It's everything.
It's everything. Everything you don't want to mess with.
Yes. It's all horror movie quality things I don't want to, it's all that level of it too you don't want to see.
Yeah. See, like at least in Texas, right, you have rattlesnakes, scorpions to deal with, right? But they're on the ground. You're not generally worrying about them. You don't have trees constantly covering you.
Yes.
Right? So it's not, you have to worry about stuff falling on you from above.
And they got spiders there the size, dude. You've seen spiders there the size, their bodies are the size of softballs.
Yeah.
And
There's some invasive species here in Houston. People keep posting pictures of them online. Just massive spider in the bathroom or something.
Oh my gosh.
Venomous spider. Yeah. I'm not talking like a tarantula. I don't know what kind it's called. I'll have to go look it up. But yeah. Okay. Somebody had one hanging from their rearview mirror in their car the other day.
I saw that one. I'm losing sleep on that mess, dude. Because I live in that area. I can tell you this is rattlesnake. This is rattler country and this is scorpion country.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not bad because I live in an apartment, but there's horror stories from my parents' friends. Now, they live on the outskirts of town, mind you. But my parents do have their house sprayed every quarter because they say there's just a lot of scorpions in the area. And their friends have woken up and with them in their bed. They've had them in their jeans when they've put them on. They've been hanging in the closet. I'm like, oh my gosh. It's like, and so y'all get an no, it's because they're out in the sticks. You don't really get an exterminator. You know, it's like, I would still, it's not cool, dude.
Yeah. All right, moving along.
Okay.
It took an hour before the herd's tail end appeared and the last of the beasts passed Perrin. The wind blew the dust cloud from the herd eastward over the hills. He climbed in his saddle and faced southward toward the Gadrobi hills. He thought to himself, Tattersail, what did you do? And remembered Talk telling him of the trail of small footprints leading from the scorched pillar that was made of the remains of Tattersail and Bellerdan. Perrin had a number of questions swirling in his head. Did you plan such a thing? Why the Reeve? Reborn and already a child of 5 or 6, are you even mortal anymore? Have you ascended? The strange primitive Reeve people you found, to what end? When we next meet, how old will you appear to be then? Perrin thought about the Reeve driving the massive herd north, a herd large enough to feed an army on the move. He realized Caladan brood was on the way to Pale, and likely Dujek wasn't prepared for it. On this point, the veteran herd is their lifeblood. Do you think they would sacrifice it in their alliance with Caladan brood to feed his army?
I had not thought about that. That's a very big possibility. They wouldn't kill. It wouldn't be one giant slaughter, but it would be you would have your herd rolling with you. You would have your stakes rolling with you. You know. Yeah. They might very well be. They could very well be. That could be part of the alliance. They decided because they probably have millions and millions of this is just one herd probably that they've probably agreed to allow to feed the army as they do this, you know, as part of whatever alliance they've got with Caladan brood.
Okay. Sounds right. Cool.
That's the only explanation I've got.
Good insight. Good insight.
Thank you.
I like it.
Texan insight. We're beef country here, so we think like that.
2 hours of riding time remained before sunset. He thought of his destination, Darujistan, and Whiskey Jack's squad that awaited him there. There was a young woman possessed by a god within that squad, one he'd been preparing to meet for 3 years. Perrin wondered if the god possessing her was even his enemy anymore. The question arrived to him unbidden, and it turned his heart cold. He reflected on the journey across the plain, where he had intended to go unnoticed. That had been a foolish thought, given he seemed to be a walking convergence, a lodestone to draw ascendance, though it seemed to be to their peril. Interesting twist there.
Yeah, very much.
Perrin had trouble reconciling how chance had answered the 5 Reeve lances when he had treated one of the twins of Opan so poorly. Good question.
Yes.
He realized his cause had become his own, not that of the adjunct or the Empire. The old woman had seen the truth in his words that he would rather have no enemies at all. He thought, endless surprises, Ganos Perrin. Ride on, see what comes.
I do like that he realizes that he is that his cause is his own, but at the same time, it's kind of not. He's still got Opan riding his hip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's more afoot here than it would seem that he knows about.
Yeah, there's a lot more. There's a lot more than, especially for me as we examine it like this.
Yes,
you know, it's like wow, there's a lot of things I missed.
He came upon a hill and spurred his horse up the slope. As he reached the summit, he yanked on the reins. The horse swung her head around, eyes rolling. Perrin's attention was elsewhere. He leaned back in his saddle and loosened his sword. He had come upon a heavily armored man, who we know to be Call. The man struggled to his feet and put his weight on one leg, then unsheathed his bastard sword, which he leaned on as he eyed Perrin. Perrin nudged his horse forward and scanned the area, noting the man seemed to be alone. He stopped with 30 feet between them. In Daru, Call said, I'm in no shape for a fight, but if you want one, it's yours. Perrin was thankful the adjunct had insisted he be schooled. He responded in fluent Daru. No, I've lost the taste for it. He leaned forward in his saddle and grinned at the mule. He asked, is that beast a war mule?
Well, I think Cruppy's is, but I don't know about this one.
Mm-hmm. Call laughed and said, I'm sure it thinks it is. He then offered Perrin some food. Perrin dismounted. He approached, then sat next to the fire and introduced himself. Call sat down and stretched out his leg and also introduced himself. He asked if Perrin was from the north. Perrin told him Genebacus initially, then Pale more recently. Call told him he looked like a mercenary, but more likely an officer. He said he had heard it was pretty bad up there. Perrin said he arrived late and saw a lot of rubble and dead people. After a small hesitation, he said he had heard a rumor that Moonspawn was now over Darujistan. Call said, "So it is," and gestured to the pot of stew, offering some to Perrin. Perrin realized how hungry he was and gratefully ate using a spoon Call lended him. For a moment he thought to ask about the leg wound, but remembered his claw training, specifically that soldiers didn't talk about anything obvious. Anything of import would come out in due time. This is part of that training I was mentioning earlier, right? I have to assume It wasn't just how to talk to people. It's probably some combat stuff as well.
Yeah, a little bit of everything, yes.
Mm-hmm. Call waited as Perrin emptied the pot of stew. When he was done, he scrubbed the spoon as best he could, then leaned back and belched. Call spoke first. He asked if Perrin was heading to Darujistan. Perrin said he was, and asked if Call was also headed that way. Call said he would be able to manage it in a couple days, though the prospect of riding into town on the back of a mule didn't appeal to him. Perrin looked at the sunset and asked if Call would mind if he shared the camp for the night. Call agreed. Perrin rose to attend to his horses. He thought it could be worth it to delay his arrival a day so he could lend Call a horse. Being escorted into the city by a local had its advantages. He may also learn something as he waited with Call. Perrin walked back to the fire and dropped his saddle, then sat and leaned back against it. He proposed his idea to Call. Call said that was a generous offer. Perrin sensed Call's suspicion and offered that the horses could use an extra day's rest, and he could plague Call with endless questions about Darujistan. Nice. Call warned that he wasn't much of a talker, and Perrin said he'd accept that risk. Call thought for a time, then said he'd be mad not to accept. He also said that he didn't know Perrin's story, and if he wanted to keep it to himself, that was his business. It wouldn't stop Call from asking him, though. Perrin could choose whether to lie or not. Perrin said, "I think it goes both ways, doesn't it?" "Well, you want my story straight? Fine, here it is, Call. I'm a deserter from the Malazan army, ranked as captain. I also did a lot of work with the Claw, and looking back on it, that's where the trouble started. Anyway, it's done." Perrin also thought, but didn't verbalize. "Oh, yes, and one more thing. People who get close to me usually end up dead." I love how Perrin does this all-out honesty thing, and it really catches people off guard when he does it many times.
Yes, well, being a straight shooter goes a long way. Just not having to sidestep someone else's BS counts for a lot.
Yes. Which Claw did he meet? What is Topper, right? It was Topper that came to pick him? Yeah, so this won't work with somebody like Topper, right?
Yeah.
Where his life is lies.
Yeah.
And it's always a power struggle, right?
Yes. Soldiery is a
little bit different. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a shared understanding of blood and mud, I think, with those fellas. That I think it's pretty universal, no matter who you work for. I think soldier is a pretty universal understood language by soldiers.
That statement, the mud and blood, that reminds me. So I used to work in the offshore oil and gas industry, okay? And we'd go out to these drill rigs. For some reason, all of the drillers, the people that actually operate the drill, are from Mississippi.
Okay.
Like this one area of Mississippi. And one of these guys, he's like, "I got mud in my blood," because they use drilling mud when they're drilling to keep the weight. It's called hydrostatic pressure. Like the column of the fluid has a pressure to it, that's what keeps the well from coming up. So they had this drilling mud, and so, I don't know. It's just when you said the blood and mud, I got flashbacks to being offshore because my friend and I are always joking about that guy that would say that.
That's too funny. I love that. Got mud in the blood.
Yeah. Call was silent for a time, with his eyes fixed on Perrin from across the campfire. He puffed his cheeks and blew out the air. Call said, "Truth as bald as that makes a challenge, don't it?" He leaned back on his elbows and looked up at the stars, then continued. "I was once a noble in Darujistan, the last son of a long-lined, powerful family. I was set for an arranged marriage, but I fell in love with another woman, a hungry, ambitious woman, though I was blind to that. She was a whore, in fact, Only where most whores I've met are pretty down to earth, she was as twisted a soul as you could imagine. He went on. Anyway, I refuted my obligations and broke off the arranged marriage. It killed my father, I think, when I married Aestal. That was the whore's name, though she's changed it since. He let out a harsh laugh and went on. Didn't take her long. I'm still not sure how she managed the details, how many men she took to bed to buy their influence, or how they did it. All I know is I woke up one day and found myself stripped of title, stripped even of my family name. The estate was hers. The money was hers. It was all hers, and her need for me had ended. Perrin said nothing, sensing there was more to come. Bacall was struggling with it. But that wasn't the worst betrayal, Perrin. Oh no. That came when I walked away from it. I could have fought her. I might have even won. Perrin watched Call's jaw tauten, the only hint of emotion that slipped his control. He continued in a flat, empty voice. Acquaintances I'd known for decades looked right through me. To everyone, I was dead. They chose not to hear me. They just walked past, or didn't even come to the gates of their estates when I called on them. I was dead, Perrin. Even the city's records claimed it. And so I agreed with them. I walked away, disappeared. It's one thing to have your friends mourn your passing in your face, but it's another to betray your own life, Perrin. But as you said, it's done. Now that's a tough story to listen to. This idea that men do stupid stuff sometimes, right? And
oh, sure.
We get ideas in our heads that, oh, this is you can see it here. You know, he fell in love with this woman.
Jealous. Sorry, it might as well be jealous.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's the wrong person, you see what happened to him here. You know, he got taken advantage of big time. And it ruined him. Yeah, broke him psychologically as well.
Yeah, it did, and I really think that Cole and Perrin have a lot in common. And it's not just the nobility; it's it's the experience as nobles, and there's also their experience as soldiers. And there's not a lot of that shared experience in any universe, I don't think, whether fantasy or not. But that's nobility and soldiery kind of running the same groups. So these guys are kind of a rarefied air in and of itself. Just what I'm saying, being nobility that are soldiers. So I think there's a lot of, so they have some shared commonality, I think, that allows them to talk boldly and baldly, as Cole said, to each other.
Right. That soldier thing. In this case, they haven't fought together, but they're used to being with people that brotherhood, it's actually closer than a lot of family, from what I hear. The people that go through that.
Exactly. I'm not a military guy. I love our military and all the folks that are willing to do that. But from what I understand, yes, that's a band of brothers kind of mindset. That's it's a thing. I get it. Mm-hmm. Your cops have that same thing, and firemen do too. You put your life in other people's hands that you work with.
Yes.
I mean, as a rule of thumb, I mean, you got to trust somebody to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Perrin looked away and squinted into the darkness. He wondered at the human urge that brings us to such devastation. Perrin said, "The games of the highborn span the world. I was born a noble, like you, Call, but in Malaz we'd met our match in the old emperor."
I'm sorry. I'm just laughing because that's just a hard statement.
Oh, yeah.
I wish we knew more about the old emperor. We know a little bit about that fella, but dude, he must have been what a rascal.
Do you pick up that he's a curmudgeon?
Oh, dude. I'm trying to think of who I'm reminded of. It's like there's a lot of, I see the ultimate, it's like part of me feels like, especially, I'm sorry, I think I brought this up in the previous episode. I talked about you need to watch the newer Star Wars stuff, because in The Rise of Skywalker, there's some very Erikson imagery in that stuff. And for some reason, for me, I kind of think of the Emperor. I still think of that Emperor as this Emperor. Just a little more insane. A little more insane.
Oh, okay.
I mean, just in a physical side, just kind of like the cackling old man. It's kind of what I'm thinking of, Okay. Not necessarily not the universe ruling emperor that the emperor is, but just kind of in the looks. But in a way, there's some power to that, though. And apparently, I think our emperor's we know what he is now. He's pretty strong now.
Mm-hmm. All right, so Perrin is in the middle of a statement here. He says, "But in Malaz, we'd met our match in the old emperor. He crushed us at every turn until we cowered like whipped dogs. Cowered for years. But it was only an issue of power, wasn't it? There are no lessons worthy enough for a noble to heed. I look back on my years within that twisted, hungry company. I look back on that life now, Call, and I see it wasn't a life at all." Perrin was silent for a bit, then he smiled and said, "Since I walked away from the Malazan Empire and severed once and for all the dubious privileges of my noble blood, damn, I've never felt so alive. It was never a life before, only the palest shadow of what I've now found. Is that a truth most of us are too frightened to face?" Call grunted. "I'm not the sharpest man you'll meet, Perrin, and your thoughts are running a touch too deep for me. But if I understand you right, you're sitting there looking at a chopped-up old fool of a man, and you're telling him he's alive, right now, as alive as can be. And whatever he betrayed back then, it wasn't life, was it?" Perrin said, "You tell me, Call." Call grimaced and said, "The thing is, I want it back. I want it all back." Perrin began laughing, and laughed until his stomach cramped up. Call watched him and then began to chuckle. He said, "Well, damn it, Perrin. You've come out of the blue like a God-sent bolt of lightning, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it more than you'll ever know." Perrin wiped the tears from his eyes and said, "Hood's breath. Just one war mule talking to another, right?" Call agreed and told Perrin to get the jug of Worrytown wine out of his pack. A little bit of info on Worrytown. It's a slum consisting of a handful of sagging buildings outside the eastern side of the city walls of Darujistan.
In the ghetto.
Yeah. It's a rough neighborhood.
Yes. It's right next door to Kenny's house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really great that Perrin was able to give Call the wake-up call he needed to appreciate his life here.
Yeah, I do.
I really
love that. I really like that exchange.
Yeah. Now, in our lives outside the Malazan universe, the reality of the situation is that most people will do what Call did once they go through something like that, sinking into the depths of despair like he did and drink themselves or sedate themselves in some way. So I'm going to talk a little bit here of the impact of divorce on men. If you're not interested in hearing what I would say, you can skip for like 5 minutes and we'll finish out the episode. Most of our audience is from America, and I think roughly 80% of you are men. In America, the divorce rate is around 50%. And of these divorces, nearly 70% of them are initiated by the wife. Many times this will come as a surprise to the husband. This will be one of the most painful things that you will go through in your life. The laws in many states are still pretty hostile toward the father, allowing the wife to use the children as a means of hurting the father. Fortunately, it seems that this trend is changing and 50-50 custody is becoming more common because the courts realize the problems with single mother households and just the societal issues that come from people. Statistically speaking, the more people go to jail, more people have teenage pregnancies in a fatherless home.
Absolutely.
Oddly, the children that are raised by only the father do not have those problems. Interesting stat.
Yes, it is.
When you find yourself in this situation, you will have a choice. You can sink into despair, or you can choose a different path. I recently heard a quote that resonated with me. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional.
I agree.
The person that the quote is attributed to, it's either, there's I think 3 different people. It could have been the Dalai Lama was one of them, and there were 2 other people. So I'm not sure exactly who actually said it. But it's very pertinent. If you try to sedate yourself like Call did by using drugs or alcohol, you can virtually guarantee a worse outcome for yourself.
Yes, you can. And I can say that as a man having done that.
Alternately, you can take your pain and use it to become something more. There's a famous bodybuilder from the 70s and 80s named Tom Platz, famous within the bodybuilding community, if you're a fan of this era of bodybuilding, which is the greatest era. I'm not going to argue with anybody about it.
Sure.
So.
Well,
as a bodybuilding fan.
I have a bodybuilding story for you if you would like to hear it.
Yeah, do it. Side. Yeah. Okay.
We were trying out a guy in LP at Fry's, and he was a bodybuilder. So much so that he actually, I think you can look him up, and I don't think he'd mind me plugging him. It's the Iron Assassin.
I'll have to look this guy up.
He's on YouTube. Okay, he's on YouTube. So
okay.
he's a Texas fellow. He's still he's still in Arlington. Okay, yeah. His name's he won't mind me plugging him. I guarantee you. He's a heck of a nice guy. He's a motivational kind of fella, and he's one of these people that likes to he's a bodybuilder. He's a nice guy.
All right. The Iron Assassin.
The Iron Assassin.
Okay. All right. So back to Tom Platz. Thank you, Billy.
Sorry,
okay.
that really went nowhere, didn't it? Sorry, I apologize. Huge diversion, no payout. I apologize.
All right, so Tom Platz, he tells a story. When he went to the 1980 Mr. Olympia competition, he came back to find that his fiance had left him for his training partner.
Ow.
So those are like the two biggest people in your life, because your training partner, you spend at least, if you're a bodybuilder, you're spending 3-4 hours a day with that person. Then the fiance, you're probably spending the rest of the time outside of work with him, right?
Yeah. Oh.
It really hurt him. Instead of letting this pain affect him negatively, he channeled it into his training for the Mr. Olympia competition in 1981. And he was an absolute monster by competition time. The way he talks about how training was for him. And I fell in love with weightlifting after a breakup when I was a teenager, actually. That's when I really, really got into it. And it really helps to channel these feelings into something productive like that.
That's good.
So not all of us are bodybuilders, but channeling your pain into exercise is a great way to give yourself a better outcome.
Yes,
Martial arts are also a great way to deal with this type of stuff. And if you can do both, that's even better. Weightlifting and martial arts, yeah.
Sure.
You will be much better off mentally, and once you have your body and your mind in order, the rest of your life has a better chance of moving forward.
Wow.
Ultimately, I want to say that we all have an inner light, one that the world will benefit from. It is your duty to become the best version of yourself so that you can bring that light to the world.
Amen.
And just remember, you're not alone.
Amen. Well said, sir.
Thank you. All right. We hit the end of the chapter right before this.
Yes.
For standout moments, Perrin's introspection at the beginning of the episode was good from a character development perspective. I really like seeing that stuff.
Yes. I like that too.
Yeah. The skirmish with the Reeve and Perrin was cool. Quite supernatural, the way that unfolded.
It's really funny because I say funny. There's just so much that goes on in this series that for some reason I kind of always forget about that until it just kind of falls, until you fall into it. You're like, oh my goodness,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it happens so fast, and it's an action sequence, so we probably blew right through it real quick.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Just...
Yeah. It's quick. It's such a small thing. It's a small event, but it's not. Because of who he meets there, having met Tattersall again.
Yeah. And though it's not as interesting to me, Perrin learning that Tattersall has somehow survived, it's important to him as a character. So that is an important part of the story. I am less interested in that whole subplot.
Yes.
I would be curious for other people that have read the series and are rereading it and listening to us as they reread it. Let me know how your thoughts are on that whole situation.
Yes. Please.
Contact at horsefrogproductions.com. I don't know if I'm in a bubble with Billy and I, because I think you and I are kind of in agreement here on how we feel about this a little bit.
So. Well, this part of our digression that we've had to edit and tastefully removed from the show involves our talking about something like this. And so, yes, we would love our fans and listeners. Please tell us what you thought and what you thought about that stuff there.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Contact at horsefrogproductions.com.
Yes, thank you. All right. The immediate friendship between Cole and Perrin is really touching. I love that.
Yes, and I've always enjoyed their easy relationship, and especially because for some reason in my mind, I thought Perrin was such a jerk, and he's really not. He's pretty chill for a dude that was killed, brought back to life, almost killed by a hound, chased off a hound, attacked by an insane and insanely powerful puppet, attacked by a hound again, sucked into the horn of darkness inside of the sword of a demigod, etc., etc. And that was just in the list from the past 2 chapters. So if this guy's a bit brusque, I understand why he's brusque now. I'm sorry. Yeah. I love Perrin. Perrin is great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It only gets better from here, too.
Yes, it does. Yeah. It does.
I really enjoyed seeing Call open up about his past.
Yes. Oh,
and I don't know that he would have done that with any of his close friends in Darujistan. I think it took this soldier relationship out in the middle of nowhere for it to come out of him.
And, you know, and I forget that this is really the first time we actually really talk to Cole.
Yes.
Or Call. I mean, he doesn't really say, I mean, it's like, other than that he's a drunk, I mean, he doesn't really, I like that he just flat out tells Perrin the whole story. Just like Perrin did to him, except Perrin's was really surmised by one sentence, but it was bloody, just blatantly honest, and it was enough to just, why not just open it up and tell it all? Time for the bro down.
Yeah, and Perrin's wake-up call for him. I mean, great.
Yeah, solid stuff.
That was a gift from Perrin right there.
Yes, it was. He never thought about it like, you know, I'm sorry, sees himself as a victim and you know, I'm so sorry. I'm having South Park flashbacks to the Meghan Markle episode. So sorry. You know what her, it's like, did you watch that yet?
No, let's not delve into Meghan Markle in the podcast. We got to keep it.
It's because it's how they see themselves. It's not Meghan Markle. It's the Princess of Canada. She's not Meghan Markle.
Oh, okay. She's but you know who it is. You know who it is. Literally.
Yes, I know. But her qualities were that she was like, you know, attractive, sorority girl, social or influencer, victim. It's like, but it's like, you know, it's millionaire, activist, influencer, victim. It's like so all these people see themselves as victims. It's amazing. And so he had been seeing himself as a victim, and now he no longer sees himself as such. He sees himself as alive, and that's a bro move, dude.
Yes.
Total bro move.
Cool. All right. Well, you got any final thoughts before we drop off here?
No, just a great episode. I love this. I forget how much I enjoy the stuff with Cole and Perrin. Great stuff.
Yeah, that's one of the standout moments of the book for me is the development of that relationship right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting because most of the other stuff is the big epic battle type stuff, right?
Yeah.
But that one in particular sticks out to me.
Well, it's part of Erikson's characters. He has the most believable characters, and it's these small things that sell the big things. You know, you don't think about it, but it is the small stuff that sells everything. It makes his unbelievable stuff more believable because of his character's believability. You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense.
Yeah, and until this point, Call was kind of a throwaway character. He was a plot mechanism for Murillo and Rallick to have a revenge story on his behalf, but he is now a worthy character.
Yeah, because he hadn't said anything until now, other than the
really.
dragons. He said the 5 black dragons.
Besides drinking all of Kruppa's water.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, that's too good. Nice.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, good job tonight.
Great episode, man.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Yes, next week.
We thank you all for joining us today.
Again, we'd really like to thank you for taking the time to be with us, and we've had a really great time talking about the topic today.
If you would like to support our show, you can find us at horsefrogproductions.com, where you can find our Patreon link. Depending on the platform you're listening from, it may also be in the episode description.
And if you'd like to contact us through email, it's at contact@horsefrogproductions.com.